G'day YouTube, my name's Lance and welcome to Bundy Bear's Shed. Well look, this is a little clip we're doing just on axles and there's a few questions about axles that we don't know. And the reason I'm doing this clip is there's a Facebook or there's a web forum called Grey Fergy Forum. We've been having a bit of a discussion about how much movement up and down is acceptable, and when you do the up and down movement here, you've got to make sure you don't rock it from side to side, just come up and down. And well, we all had different ideas on what we thought was acceptable just by a video that one of the members put up there. So yeah, we had differing views, so well, what better way to, let's do a bit of a test and just see. Now, this axle here is a 16 spline. We test a 19 spline, and this is one, these are worn, we don't know what bearing wear is in them or anything like that. This one here is the one I did the clip on fitting the Sparex half shaft bearing seal and collar kit. And so look, follow along, we're just going to take some measurements of all the axles. We have a TE20 there where we can actually, I've taken this axle out and put a kit in it, and I haven't taken the other one out yet, so without the other axle pushing the two tips out, we can check what movement we have on that axle. And then I just sit this axle in. I don't put any shims on it, just to push him right across, and that zeroes out the axle play. Now, I'm not ready to put the axles in and shim them yet because I still have to put new bearings on the other one, but ideally, or if you follow the book, it says once you have the two axles in and shimmed correctly, if you move one axle in and out, you should have 8 to 10 thousandths of an inch movement. So yeah, at the end where you see it tight, that has to be shimmed. I actually should have a few thou movement there, but the whole thing was just to have a measurement from the collar here to the tip, just so if people aren't sure if their collar has moved, to have a measurement to work with and see how much movement's here and see how much movement a worn bearing. We don't know how much wear these bearings have. They're out of tractors that are 60 years old, so they may be a bit worn, they may not be. And this one's a new one, so follow along. It's I learned a little bit out of it, so hopefully you will too. Right, take two. I started off with this analog dial gauge, and as you can see, the face washes out. It's hard to get a good look at it. So we've gone and set up a digital dial gauge, and this is on the 16 spline axle. So look, we have around 81 thousandths of an inch. It's only a rough measurement too, isn't it? And then when we cross it over, about 2 millimeters roughly. That's with our slop on that one, so we'll swing him across to the 19 spline and we'll just see what happens there. Right, we have our 19 spline axle set up. This might have a bit of dirt in that in the bearings too, it's just an old axle, so it could actually end up with more. But that's 2.23 2.23 millimeters, or yeah, we'll just zero them again, make sure. A bit over 2 millimeters anyway. We'll zero this one out. Okay, 2 millimeters. We'll get it to swap over, there we go. Still about 80 thou. So we don't know what condition these axles are in, or the bearings, or anything like that, but that's just a little interesting an interesting guide. Now what we should do is measure from the collar here to the tip of the axle on both of them, and that will give us a fair indication as to if this collar has moved off or not. So we'll go and just get an old tape measure and do that. Okay, here we are. looking at the stars. So by the time we put the tape at the collar and measure, line up with the tip at the top here, we have 679 millimetres, or in miles an hour, it's 2 foot 9/16. Hang on. 13/16 by the look of that. Now on the 16 spline axle, with the collar sitting home, just see if it's the same. Yeah, 679 millimetres. Yep, the same measurement. So that'd be an indication on your axle as to whether the collar had started to move off yet. So yeah, quite interesting. Stuff I never knew. Never hurts to learn, does it? Right, now just for a comparison, because we don't know with the other axle here how much bearing wear or anything like that. This is one that I've done up on one of the videos. It's the axle off the 1948. I've actually put a shore seal here just as a secondary seal. Yeah, we have a new seal, new bearing, new everything. So with it all new, let's see what we have. So 117 thou. We'll go to so on this older one, we have 3 millimetres, which is close to 1/8 of an inch. Actually, it's a bit more because when you go back to the thou, 125 thou is 1/8 of an inch, and so yeah, look, we're up there. Now, why the difference? Well, see the little lip. I'll try and bring you down a bit. The difference in movement, you can see why. Now see this one here, being a later axle, see it has that extra little lip down the bottom there? My bar is actually in it. This little lip here. Now that lip there is another type of, with the axle going around, it sort of tries to shield stuff away from the axle from going down in the gap there. So instead of going down in the hole, this little gap hopes that a bit of grass or something would get caught in there. Now with this one here, you can see we don't have that. So this being a 1948, the early one, they don't have that lip, where later on they do. They're both 16 spline axles, but yeah, it's just a little difference that I wasn't aware of. Well, I hadn't taken any notice of until now. Okay, now this is an axle still in the TE20. There's no axle in the other side to hold load against it, so we'll pull him out, try and do it evenly. 66 thousandths of an inch. There's 0.2 difference. Now in millimetres, 0.012. We haven't changed over. There we go. 1.6 millimetres. I'll just zero that again. There's a little bit of flex here that That's that fine. So there's 0.01 of a millimetre as a starting point. So 1.73 take the 0.0, 1.7 millimetres. So without the other axle in, that's the movement we have. Now I'll just slide the axle in the other side, and what my point is by putting the axle in the other side and making those two little tips of the axles touch, this movement will disappear. So without two axles in, you can expect that, because that's the measurement that, you know, we measured on the other axles roughly, give or take. But we'll go on, I'll slide the axle in the other side and just do up a couple of bolts loosely, just for the exercise. I don't really want to put it in yet, but it'll prove a point. Well, there's the same axle, and I've gone and put the right hand axle in with no shims. So you can see there's no movement there now. So what's happened is, with the axle over the other side, the two tits pushing together, they've pushed this cone, the cone on this side, right into the cup on this side. So, and that's how it tightens it all up. So it's all right to have that slop on your bearing until you put it in here. Now, how much slop people have? Well, the only thing that can change that slop is bearing wear. If the bearing's worn and your collar hasn't slipped, and look, collars don't slip very often. I've only ever seen them slip when people have put them on wrong. If it's an old tractor, it's been there for years, they probably haven't slipped. But not to say they won't. But so there you go. Now we know the movement. I'd say with the measurements that we took over on the bench, I'd say if it was a lot more than that, you would have bearing wear that was coming into play if your collar was in the right position. So there you go. I've learned something.